All right, Clay, let's open our latest podcast with another game of trivia for you. I might have actually asked you this before, but how many, this is one of how many episodes of Star Trek that are derived from Latin? Alter Ego doesn't initially stick out as Latin, but it is, obviously. It's Latin.
Yeah, I don't know. That doesn't count. We talking like all of Star Trek here?
All of Star Trek, yeah. It's
10.
Under 50.
Oh, under 50? 13.
17. 17. So it doesn't have the list of them, so I can't read them off to kill half the time of this recording. But it's one of 17.
Well, I do still win by Price is Right's rules, right? Because I was the closest, but yes. I didn't go over.
It's more embarrassing to go over than it is to underestimate. I think like there was one that was like something ego. What, that one that Tom Paris visits the planet and gets like framed for a murder that they view through his eyes.
Like, isn't it like a multiple word, like something ego, something Eris or something?
I think it's something like that. Anyway, we're here to talk about Alter Ego, which is the 14th episode of the third season of Star Trek Voyager. It came out on January 15th, 1997, written by our old TNG friend Joe Menosky, directed by our new Voyager friend Bob Picardo. In-universe date 50460.3, which is 2373. In Alter Ego, Tuvok and Harry Kim become interested in holodeck character who is more than she seems. Ba-ba-ba-ba-bum. So you texted me before we started recording halfway through the day, and you gave me your opinion about this episode, and I wonder if your opinion remains the same now that we're on the twilight of the day and you've sat in reflection for what I assume was hours after you finished watching it.
Yes. My opinion remains the same.
Oh, well.
I
loved it.
Hated this episode.
Interesting. Well, at least it gives us a starting place about where to talk, because I thought this was the in relative terms, I thought this was the best Voyager episode we've seen in a long time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But it was only the first half, and then I stopped caring after the first half.
Do you like the first half?
Yeah, I like the first half a lot more.
Oh boy.
So
okay.
I'll try to justify it here. So I know that you, well, it's something we've been complaining about, which is that Voyager neither takes its concept seriously, nor does it really do any kind of character work that specifically specifies, to be redundant, like what characters are supposed to be about in the show. And I thought that the first half of this episode at least gave me a good sense of this is a show dealing with its concept. It's playing with the characters that it has. And it's also, even if I don't really like the tone that Voyager wants to take, which is kind of like it's kind of like after school special workplace cornball drama, sort of like that's the tone that Voyager seems to want.
Sure.
At least I thought that here in the first half of this one, they did as much with that prism or whatever, like the way that they want the show to be. They did as much with that idea as they've done in a very long time. So like Tuvok and Harry Kim falling in love with the same holodeck character, I thought was like, you know, it doesn't deal with anything deep, and it doesn't particularly get into this aspect of love in any way that's actually anything more than a superficial after-school special kind of way of dealing with it. But it does do it. My problem is that when it became what Voyager and post-Voyager shows tend to do, which is that after they do this setup, they just turned it into like a generic Star Trek plot at that point. That's when my interest fell off. But I was even giving like the Luau holodeck program the benefit of the doubt, being like, you know, who's to say these idiots who are trapped in the Delta Quadrant don't set up this ridiculously corny Luau program? I like to I thought it was kind of cute that like Torres gets choked out by a lei from the Hawaiian thing. Like I thought that was kind of fun. I don't know. It felt different to me in a way that kept my attention through the first half of this, where at least I thought that it felt like they were doing something, and it felt somewhat interesting to me.
Yeah, I'm on the complete opposite end of that. I thought I liked the luau fight scene was cool. because it was kind of creepy in a Westworld kind of way.
Yeah, it was spooky, unsettling.
Yeah, and like, you know, when Torres was getting choked out by that hula girl, she had like a big smile on her face, the hula girl. So it had that kind of that fun.
B'Elanna's over there getting laid by those Hawaiian boys.
Yes. But man, I could not have been less interested in Harry Kim and Tuvok falling in love with the same holodeck like the first half of this felt like I was watching a Reddit thread come to life, where it was like Harry Kim's like, I can't stop thinking about this fake woman. Then Tuvok is like, have you heard of No Nut November? And like
this whole episode would be solved by people just rubbing it out. I think would be the end of this conflict.
Like I didn't. As soon as I saw Harry Kim getting like jealous of Tuvok, I was like, oh my God, is this really going to be two guys on the ship fighting over a fucking hologram girl? Like,
that feels so that feels like it actually embracing the Voyager idea, you know, that they're trapped out there and this is what they have, you know?
I didn't find it interesting though. Like the Tuvok's interest in the girl I didn't think was particularly convincing, and anything that they were trying to do with her being kind of like I got a little bit more interested when they actually showed that there was something kind of sinister about her.
Yeah.
But even there, I thought they undercut it when Chakotay was like, yeah, actually, I don't know if anyone watching this show remembers, but this exact same thing happened on The Next Generation that's not too long ago.
Yeah, that's partially why I don't like the second half, is because they make it obvious what they're doing.
And then, you know, the end of it is like, it's like that Enterprise episode where they drop off Hoshi at the guy's house, and he's like, I thought maybe you could stay with me in my spiky face. And she's like, I don't want to stay with your spiky face.
A little bit of a Beauty and the Beast situation.
Yeah, and like I didn't think... I would have been more interested if Harry was not involved at all, because the idea of Tuvok, who is a Vulcan first and a husband second, falling in love with a new person, real or otherwise, that's a little bit more interesting to me than spending half an episode of them kind of like having school. And I understand what you're saying, like, yeah, this is probably something that would happen, I guess, but it's just the way that it was set up in a very sitcom-y way didn't interest me, and I didn't find it charming really at all.
That's so my after school special comment is the problem for me with the first half, which is that it's the tone of Voyager does not allow this idea to be taken seriously, even though I think in a well done and well executed show of Voyager, I think that this is a really viable plot idea to do, which is that the characters start falling in love, like in their desperate loneliness, which I think is thematically nicely represented through like Tuvok's sort of plot through line here, where, you know, the ending of the episode ends on focusing on Tuvok's loneliness and how alone he feels. Like I feel that that's something that a serious show would actually take seriously. I'm full of redundancies tonight. And instead, you're just left with this like junior high jealousy angle is the only way that they can go at it. And that doesn't feel real to me, because if this was a real serious show, I think that there's a little bit more of like a disturbed relationship between Harry and Tuvok there, where, you know, there's some real uncomfortable moments and conversations between them that they're fighting over this holodeck program. But instead, you're just kind of left with a bunch of Tuvok's Vulcan sayings, and like the Vulcans are apparently like the Germans, that they have a word for everything that comes along their way. And you're left with that, and it's just, you know, watching those two sort of bicker over it, or if not bicker, you just see Harry Kim's jealousy pop into frame, and Tuvok has to try to deal with it and intellectualize it as though he's not falling in love. He's just finding it intellectually stimulating. I don't know, it's really just compared to the previous stuff we've seen, which it seems like it has not embraced either characterization or what the concept of the show is setting up. This one felt unique to me in a way that it somewhat held my attention, even though it's not always a positive thing to hold my attention, or the reasons that it's holding my attention. And again, this is basically the Moriarty plot from TNG, just done over and over again, and that's a recurring problem that we're running into. But is your problem really stemming from the tone of the thing, or do you just not jive with this idea of Tuvok and Harry in love in the first place?
I think there are ways that it could have been used in a more interesting way, but like once I saw that it was going to be a jealousy fest, I just checked out because it just felt too sitcom-y to me, and it didn't really do anything interesting with it. Like I feel like they should have either gone. I think it would have been more interesting if like the whole ship was having this problem where they were all kind of like falling in love with holodeck programs and it was really affecting the ship or whatever. Or I kind of wish that I think it would have been more interesting if Tuvok had fallen in love with a different holodeck character. Yeah. Because I didn't think that the Harry Kim stuff even like he just kind of drops off at about the halfway point too. Like they don't really, it's not really once Harry kind of like sees that they're playing Vulcan chess or whatever, they kind of get into a fight about it, and then that's kind of it.
Well, because I was going to push back on because I don't think that the show actually focuses on Harry Kim's jealousy for very long at all. Like I actually don't find that I was a little bit surprised thinking as they were setting this up that this was going to be like a key thing that happens, but it's not really. Harry gets sidelined pretty quickly once Tuvok takes over. Yeah, and so I was thinking like, why even do that angle? Like I feel like it would be more interesting if Harry's got the hots for this hologram girl, and Tuvok is trying to talk him, teach him the ways of nofap, and then like in doing so, he also meets his own hologram girl, who he becomes infatuated in, and then you can kind of focus on Tuvok and his loneliness and what does it look like for him to be affected by this in a way that doesn't need the baggage of the Harry Kim stuff. Yeah. And I think that would have been more, because like when you get to the end of the episode and he's standing in there with the lizard girl and she's like, won't you stay? And he's like, maybe if I wasn't married and I don't know, on a ship, maybe I'd think about it. Like I wasn't like feeling any of that because it's a tough one because like I don't think Tuvok gets enough time to convincingly fall in love with this girl before they kind of give her the evil spin. So I don't really believe any conflict that he has at that point about her. And so when you get to that point at the end when he sees behind the curtain at the wizard's place, his hesitation to be like, maybe in another life we could have been something just doesn't ring true with me. Yeah. He's a little hamstrung because he has a wife, and well, I actually find that very interesting because he is a Vulcan and he is a husband. And I have to assume that the Vulcans have some regard for traditional familial units, like I'm sure monogamy. Monogamy. I'm sure being married on Vulcan is a big deal. Like, I mean, wasn't that like that was like half a season of Enterprise, wasn't it? No, it is. Yeah, like they take their marriages very seriously. Yeah, and so like the idea that So do we all. Yeah. If Amy's listening,
listen, they gotta take it seriously somewhere because it ain't happening here. But like, so with that in mind, having Tuvok finally be like, if everybody else is kind of like partying and they're like, yeah, whatever, it's gonna be set where I'm never gonna see my wife again.
Everyone just fucking holodeck characters.
Yeah, like clearly that's what's happening.
Yes,
but Tuvok is not there for the party. He doesn't want to wear the lei.
He symbolically removes his lei. He just takes it off. Yeah,
exactly. And so to see even him start to crack under the situation is actually really interesting. I just don't think it needed all the extra sitcom-y bullshit to get into it.
Yeah. So I would say that I guess for a couple different ways that I suppose I look at it, it's slightly different. Like I almost don't consider what Tuvok does to be falling in love in some ways. Like I guess he
Well, whatever it is, you know.
Yeah, well, because he sort of sees it as like intellectually stimulating, I guess. And I don't know if that's supposed to be a metaphor for Vulcans falling in love, because a big through line of this obviously is like Tuvok trying to rationalize love. And like, so one of the things that I did take away from this and I thought was a real positive was that I feel like this is the first time in a long time, and maybe to the biggest point that we've ever seen, that this was like an explanation of how the Vulcans approach life in some ways, you know? Mm-hmm. And they don't do that very often. And what I appreciated was I thought that it treated Tuvok as a Vulcan fairly well, because it does the thing that, in my opinion, most understands the Vulcans, which is that there is something there, right? But they have become supremely skilled at sort of rationalizing away their feelings. It's not that they don't feel things, but they're supremely intellectual to the point where they just rationalize everything, and they sort of see patterns, and that they get over this emotional stuff by thinking about things that way. And I liked that. And that also puts you in this place where he's married, but he's not really he's like having an emotional affair, you know, more than anything else. And it's like, that's not that bad, and you can't ding Tuvok. And I guess it all just comes down to the thing of the show is an after-school special, and it's not going to seriously damage the characters in that way. Right. So Tuvok's not going to have a real conflict about any of this. And so I guess what I'm left with, what I liked about it, was that sort of bullshitty intellectualization of it, as opposed to any kind of like real character story. Like I never connected with this one on a way that I feel like the better character stories of TNG or DS9 land, where you really feel something for the character.
Sure.
This felt more, probably unintentionally, but it fit with the Vulcan aspect of it, where I didn't really connect with it, but I thought it was interesting. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that's points in its favor, but it was like kind of neat that it lined up that way. I don't know. I'm spinning my wheels trying to justify it, but that's how it comes across to me.
Yeah, you said he's having an emotional affair, and I think another thing that's interesting, that would have been interesting if they kind of got into it more, is that almost feels like for a Vulcan it would be worse than a physical affair, you know? But yeah, they don't really. I think there's a lot there they could have gotten into, but it's just I mean, if I'm being completely honest, the first 10 minutes of it like really checked me out. Like I watched it, but that intro where it was like Harry Kim goes to Animal House, it was just like, this is not.
Tom Paris specifically mentions what line of Hawaiian shirt he's wearing. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah. There's something funny about, I think there could have been something really funny about, excuse me, Harry Kim trying to get laid, and Tuvok is the guy who's like helping him do it or something.
Yeah.
But I know that's not the show they were making. But just like sort of.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say that lead-in just felt too this week on Voyager for me, where it's like, this week Harry Kim falls in love with a hologram. Wah, wah, wah. You know, it just was not. It was not a good lead-in for the rest of the story, and I thought once the rest of the story got going, it never really got there for me.
Do you like the idea of Harry Kim turning to Vulcan ideology to get over his crush? That seems to be divisive.
I think it makes sense. Like that feels very college sex comedy to me.
It does, yeah. And
like as a gag, it's pretty funny. Like I don't mind it as a gag, but I find it generally stupid.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because I think it feels pretty Star Trek-y in a way. Like, it's stupid, but I think that it works for like the way that the characters treat Vulcans. It sort of makes sense that this would happen to me. Not in a real world sense, but in a Star Trek sense.
No, I don't disagree, but also that's another thing that feels to me like Tuvok should. It's like it feels like if someone, hold on a second. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Tuvok.
Sorry, some stuff in my throat. It felt like borderline white college kid becomes Rastafarian to me.
Yeah. Yep.
And I feel like
we've all been there. That's you can hear my dreads jangling in the background.
It's still the best Lonely Island SNL bit is the Rastafarian.
Rastafarian.
So good. But I feel like Tuvok should have put up more of a fight before he's like, here's all the tools you need to get rid of you know what I mean? Like
to not let Harry Kim know right away, like to not give him the Vulcan secrets?
like I feel like Tuvok is pretty on the ball about what is going on with Harry, and I feel like Tuvok's answer probably shouldn't be, yeah, why don't you try doing some Vulcan meditation? I think it would be like, why don't you take my culture more seriously and just stop going to the fucking holodeck? But that being said, like I would be okay with that thing if it was a more honest application of it. Like if Harry was actually legitimately, if he was interested in doing that in the Vulcan culture the way like Kess was, where it's like it really is beneficial to her to work with Tuvok to develop whatever the fuck she was doing.
Her powers.
Yeah, whatever. Like that feels a little bit more honest than Harry Kim turning to, space Buddhism because he can't get his mind off a girl.
Interesting.
I think the conversation is interesting.
Yeah.
From Tuvok's point of view, but I don't know. If they were going to do that, I wish they had done it with something a little bit less goofy.
It's I guess it's interesting because I see the Kess and Tuvok thing as sort of like a hand wavy made up connection between the two of them.
Sure. Yeah.
I see Harry's.
It's all made up.
Yeah. Well,
but I know what you mean.
Harry's thing feels more like this is an actual grounded human story, which is that because Kess and Tuvok are mostly bonding about their psychic powers, which has no real world application to it. But Harry falling in love and being the sort of 12-year-old who just can't deal with this at this point, and he turns to Tuvok as a kind of solution to it. I feel there are the barest of threads of this turning into something interesting about the Vulcan idea not being the escape that even Tuvok thinks it is for himself.
Sure.
It exposes the weakness of this for the Vulcans in some ways. And also just the weakness of Harry trying to become a Vulcan in that way. It sort of does it. The show does not spend any amount of time on this because it eventually gets to a point where they're it's actually an evil alien who's trying to take over the ship and all that stuff. And it's who cares? But it's there. I think I don't know if the show wants to talk about it, but I appreciate at least having a concept that I go, this could have kind of been cool. And I like the I have a soft spot for the Vulcans, so I like this idea of Harry for less than ideal reasons trying to get into it and Tuvok sort of trying to show him the way, but again, it's 10 minutes of a 40-minute episode, and I don't think it goes anywhere.
That's the thing. Is it is interesting, and I would have loved to have seen the scene where Tuvok shoots him the side eye when he shows up for work on the bridge wearing one of those big, ugly Vulcan necklaces they have in the motion picture.
He's got his sideburns and sharp little points.
Yeah, that would be legitimately funny if you had Harry Kim appropriating Vulcan culture. That would be very funny.
Not cool, Mr. Kim.
But I think you're right. I think there is something really interesting there, a kernel of it. But it's wasted on one scene where he's doing these thought exercises, and Paris comes in. He's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And he's like, "Tom, I'm doing these things that Tuvok taught me, so I won't get a boner."
Yep.
And it's it doesn't. It's just there for half a second, and then they just kind of jettison it. And I think it's another thing too, where if it was just Harry, it would be, you could kind of spend a little more time on that stuff, where if it's like, if the problem is, okay, yeah, Harry is having emotional problems that are manifesting as he's in love with a holodeck person, whatever, but it is the manifestation of a deeper emotional problem because of where they are,
yes,
and what's going on. Like, that's interesting to me.
Yeah, that's a better episode for Harry. So obviously,
yeah, but fighting over a holodeck girl for 5 minutes is not it for me.
Yeah, no, agreed. It's at its core, that's that Harry conflict there, which is that you're alone in the Delta Quadrant and you're turning to a holodeck thing. It's reminiscent of the Matrix problem. It's like, do you want reality, or do you just want to get through this and be happy? And there's something interesting there. But again, it's probably one of those episodes that is like, there's 10 different semi-interesting threads and none of them are particularly hitting the point, know? And so you get to the end of it and it's just fine.
I would love to see an episode of Voyager specifically where the problem of the week is just the crew is spending too much time on the holodeck.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I feel like that is ripe for this kind of thing where it's like, if any long-term, if the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria had a holodeck on board,
right,
I don't know if they would have made it to America.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
There's a certain point where the trip is so long and it's so soul-crushing. Yeah, but you got this other thing that's like, better than booze.
Yeah.
Or we don't have booze.
When you eat the steak, it tastes real.
Right, exactly. Like, how does that affect? Eventually, this is going to affect everybody at some point, especially if there's no like rules about how long you can stay in there or whatever.
Yes.
But so I think there's a lot more in this realm that they could mine, and it doesn't all have to be like depressing. I think it could be in a fairly good, funny episode.
Yep.
But it's just not what it's about. And I'm not saying this should be that, but that is something I would be interested to see.
We can just spend a little bit of time before we get to patron thoughts. What do you think about the halfway point, turn it into a sort of, I'll call it a stock Star Trek narrative turn?
Yeah, well, yeah, it didn't really. I was interested when she showed up in his room.
She stole the doctor's holodeck emitter.
Right. I was interested until I saw that she had stolen the holodeck emitter.
Yeah.
And I was like, first of all, how?
Yes.
Like, what do you...
She went into, what did she say? She went into like his sickbay holodeck emitter or something like that? I can't remember.
Whatever. But secondly, like, I was thinking for a half second, I was like, this is interesting if she's something other than a holodeck program.
That's been when they're in this nebula for no particular reason. It's like, all right, yeah.
But when it was just like another Moriarty type thing until they reveal that it's something else equally lame.
Yeah.
It had me for a second. Like that meme. They really had me. They had me there for a second at the beginning.
Yeah, I checked out at that point. Once they're like, this is an alien type thing, or like once she gets out of the holodeck and becomes a threat to the ship, I lost 95% of my interest in the episode.
They do try to thematically tie it together, though, right?
They do.
The whole thing at the end is that this woman is just extremely lonely on this space station in a way that Tuvok can relate to.
Yep.
But again, I just don't think they lean into that as much to really make that stuff land.
Yeah. Agreed. And it's another serialization problem, or not even a serialization. It's a characterization problem, I think, which is that the Tuvok being lonely feels pretty reminiscent to me of our problem with shows like Discovery, which they'll go like, Arium is like a European backpacker or something. Like they'll have this thing where they just bring up this trait, or like Raffi is abusive to people she works with, and you're like, is she? But then they'll show you the one scene that's a flashback to like she's being a dickhead to somebody, and you go, oh, I guess the show is trying to justify it. But I feel like Tuvok being lonely makes sense in the same way that the modern shows, it makes sense that this character is that way, but you haven't really done anything to show me that that's what Tuvok is.
Yeah.
And I think that's more just a problem. It doesn't need to be a serialized storyline where Tuvok gets more and more depressed, but it needs to be a recurring motif that Tuvok is lonely and like upset by his loneliness and stuff like that. I just don't get that sense from him all the time.
Yeah, and I think Star Trek around this time, because we've talked about this before, and this is one of my big gripes with Enterprise, really forgets how to maximize their cold open.
Yeah.
And this one uses the entire cold open to focus on Harry. And if they had used the cold open to focus on Tuvok and show us that he is lonely and removed and et cetera, and then kind of start from that point of view and then bring in the Harry stuff, I think it focuses the point a lot more and makes it not feel as goofy.
Yeah, that's true. It does it does do a little bit of a bait and switch with the lead character where you think it's going to be Harry, but then they shift it to become a Tuvok story. And it's like, well, they could have just started with Tuvok and made this be a little bit more cohesive. All right, well, that's it. We'll go to patron thoughts now about this one. If you're a Patreon at patreon.com/The Pensky File and you support the show there for a couple dollars a month, $5 a month, you get to relieve your thoughts about upcoming episodes. And we read them on the podcast. I'm going to open up your little, where the hell's your chat window? Sometimes I just cannot find the chat window in Discord. This is Alter Ego.
Open up your chat window.
Here comes Kyle Barat
Let
with Alter
inside
Ego.
the comments from Patreon. Alter Ego begins as a rom-com starring the character on the show who is unable to express emotion, and also Tuvok.
Ba-dum-bum.
Yes, Garrett Wang is awful in this episode, and the only way I could be convinced he's a good actor is if I found out that in real life he's actually an 80-year-old Jamaican lady or something. I really wish I had watched the episode. You know, I went to Jamaica once. I'll save that story for another time.
Have a spicy take on that one.
I really wish I had watched the episode that the last 10 minutes of this one thinks it's been. Tuvok as a lonely individual with no one to mentally stimulate him is a great idea, but his early scenes with Marina just have her...
I also could not remember. I think it's Marina. I think you were right, yeah.
Just have her deliver lame pop psychology rather than actually connect to him on a deep level necessary for the character drama to pay off at the end. If they got rid of the useless Kim story and lame comedy at the start and made it a more focused Tuvok character study, this episode could have really been something because the last few scenes are great. 2 shirts, which give Malcolm Reed an instant erection out of 5. Yeah, you know, like imagine if the cold opening was just like Tuvok trying to talk to other people on the ship and them just being like, what the fuck what?
Yeah, not getting jokes and stuff like that.
Yeah. You know, I was thinking, though, has he ever talked to the other Vulcan that they introduced last episode?
No, he mentions that he's on the ship, but he doesn't. You think that those two would just hit it off like great friends.
Yeah, I guess they don't have to be friends. It's like, you know, I go to the same school as your cousin. We don't know each other technically.
That's right. Well, it's like the two Italian kids are just gonna sit together at lunch or something like that, talk about the motherland.
I appreciated your pause to find the least offensive nationality to use.
The 2 white kids gonna go sit together. I mean, yeah, it's setting up this. I think the guy's name is Vorik. Setting up Vorik for whatever Vorik is going to do is coming because they're laying the track for this guy. But yeah, Tuvok doesn't want to connect with him, I guess. Which could have been. I don't know. I mean, I agree that Tuvok needs to be examined a little bit more. I think that the problem you run into is that Tuvok is just you run dangerously close to Data territory sometimes. You know, like there's this balancing act to keep him away from just being a Data character who doesn't understand things. And also not care. I guess that's the space, is that he has to sort of not understand humans, but actually be upset by it in a way that Spock wasn't, maybe. I don't know if that's the hole that you have to drive through.
Yeah, it's a strange... It's excuse me. It's a strange evolution, right? Because Data is there to occupy the Spock space on TNG, right?
Yep.
More or less.
Yep.
And I think since then, they have kind of blended them together a bit, where you don't get it. I think if the Doctor wasn't on this show, it would be a lot more apparent. They probably would lean into it more.
Yeah.
But the Doctor kind of takes some of that weight off of Tuvok and lets him be more of a person. Also, good on Robert Picardo for adding in that scene where he gets to make out with two ladies.
That's his only scene, right? And he's just like, we're putting this in. Give me the writers. Yeah, I mean, he's a director.
I told Rick, he said I could block off a whole day for this shot.
Do it again from the top. Tax Bear says, alter ego, what if Microsoft Office got really horny and also hacked the rest of your computer? Jokes aside, a fairly predictable episode and one that doesn't benefit from the Vulcan expressing more emotions than Harry Kim. Also, Harry Kim still doesn't get laid. No one gets laid. This is Star Trek. This isn't Star Wars. Here's Jaron Hatch with alter ego.
Do you think the title is referring to Joe Manoski's alter ego as a girl-obsessed teenager? I guess that's what happens when you were the only kid who wore Hawaiian shirts while in middle school. Speaking of which, leave it to Voyager to find a way to make luau's boring. I watched this while at work and was actually more engaged by the emails I was writing. Thanks for the productivity boost, guys. 2 Garland Garots out of 5.
Mm-hmm. Hawaiian shirts had a brief time during my high school career. They became like a thing.
Apparently they are back.
Are they? I have not seen them.
It's sort of like a hip, at least I've been told. I don't know, maybe it's just California, but I was told.
It's a closet full of Hawaiian shirts behind you.
Yeah, I've been told that the Hawaiian shirt is now like in again.
Oh.
But who's to say?
Which was a better look, the bowling shirt or the Hawaiian shirt?
Ooh. I'm gonna say the Hawaiian shirt only because the bowling shirt was always gigantic.
Yeah.
I was doing some style research for this project I'm trying to develop that takes place in the early 90s, and I was looking for like 90s teenager type clothes, and it's a pretty nondescript. It's just everything was huge.
Yeah.
The sweaters were huge, the pants were huge, the t-shirts were huge.
Yeah.
I don't know. Take that for whatever it means.
Yeah.
We had a governmental surplus. Well, no, I guess not yet at that point, but
that was our heyday. We just had so much material. Just had to make gigantic clothes with it.
It was the end of history. They didn't need it for anything else.
No.
There were no more wars.
Kenzito says, alter ego. Reading the blurb for this one, it sounds like one to skip, but it's actually surprisingly good. There's good character work for both Tuvok and Kim, and genuine chemistry between Tuvok and the alien. 4, you're in love with the computer subroutines, out of 5. Alter ego. Kim, Tuvok, I keep getting these urges and feelings for a woman I do not want. Can you help? Tuvok. Yes, Ensign. I know of a special 5-fingered ritual to achieve what we Vulcans refer to as post-nut clarity. In all seriousness, I like this episode. Engaging story, good pacing, and well performed. Also, I realize why the Doctor doesn't make an appearance in this. Picardo is directing. Neat. 3 games of Space Kerplunk out of 5. He does make an appearance, Changeling, which we just talked about.
Yeah.
Pay attention.
Open your eyes.
Open your eyes. Close your eyes. Check out our Deadwood podcast. Something pretty. This is Alter Ego from Justice for Toonshoe.
The Misadventures of Incel Harry Kim. This episode was one of the best unintentional comedies in all of Trek, between Tuvok's subtle roasts of Harry, Harry's constipated attempt at Vulcan meditation, and the general bizarreness of a crew celebrating at a luau straight from Sim's house party, while they're still trapped 70 light years from Earth. If you had luau party gone homicidal on your Voyager bingo card, consider yourself a master. I think this episode only scores high because I enjoyed Tim Russ's performance. That and the perpetual entertainment of knowing Harry Kim got his sex life erased by Vulcan Jenga. 3 Hawaiian shirts with a pineapple motif out of 5.
How do you feel about the luau thing at this point?
It was fine. Like, whatever.
Season wide, I guess. Like, are you supportive of this idea? Yeah.
I liked the other place better.
Yeah.
The other place had characters, This one is just Hawaiian shirts and looking like a dumbass.
Yeah. It's I get it. I get what they're trying to do, but I would prefer they just stay at the bar. Artoria says, alter ego, this is but a portent of the dreadful future ahead of us. It reminds me of things going on in Japan with virtual girlfriends. 'Tis the bane of the social introvert and neckbeard. That aside, I thought Tuvok's portrayal of a Vulcan is very well done. Probably second best next to Nimoy. 3 lonely introverts out of 5.
Oh, so he means ahead of us, like in the real world future?
I think he means
I
Voyager.
thought he meant...
Oh, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, this is but a portent of the dreadful future ahead of us. Oh, I don't know. I read it as a Voyager criticism.
Yeah, I wasn't sure because either way, I'm not thrilled.
The future does not look bright. Patrick Siva says, alter ego, Harry is now Geordi in this next-gen script. B'Elanna plays Worf, just as nondescript. Tuvok's well-used Troy, Paris dressed like the boy, but best is Doc's Riker, ball-gagged and horsewhipped. 3 mandatory fun work parties out of 5.
Wouldn't you want to see Brad Dourif's character at this luau? Like barely keeping it together. Just wanting to...
You're talking about Suter, right? Not Doc Cochran? Yeah, Suter.
Well, either way, but Suter just barely stopping himself from pulling one of those guys into the back and stabbing them holographically through the neck.
He would have started rubbing one out when B'Elanna was getting choked with that lay. Oh, my God. Yeah.
Did we talk about that recently, how they should have one character who's a psychopath who just goes into the holodeck just to get out his bloodlust and murder people?
That's how they should have cured. Did they try to do that with Suter?
I don't remember.
They did, right? Because he kills Neelix on the holodeck, right?
Oh, is that what happens? That's right, yeah.
Someone kills Neelix on the holodeck. I assume it was him.
I'm pretty sure they get that program locked and loaded for whoever wants it that week.
It's the gag from Airplane where it's just a line of passengers waiting to like beat up the hysterical person. I read this one. So the next comment. Norman Buckwald has our next comment for Alter Ego. And here you go.
Tuvok's Fatal Attraction hologram makes jealous Harry pout and say all he got was a scary clown. What? Scary clown? I don't remember that. The murderous Polynesian holograms with their lays maybe made the writers give a justified response to a Rick Berman edict to put in Baywatch. Problematical as this episode is, there is some decent stuff, and Harry and Tuvok's quality time with Kowtow does continue for the rest of the series. Oh, so Harry continues to down this path of Vulcaning?
Oh, I have no idea.
2.5 choking lays out of 5.
I guess.
That's kind of interesting, but I feel like it gets off on a really bad foot.
The first step's a doozy. Point Extra G says, Alter Ego, I've fallen for someone the way that Harry has fallen for Mariana, and far more recently and at an older age than I'd care to admit. You'd think it would happen more on Voyager with actual people or holodeck characters. A Harry Tuvok Hollow Woman love triangle is not choice. I guess Riker fell for a hologram, so Harry and Tuvok aren't in too bad of company. The falling for the hologram is an idea that has legs in this universe, I think.
Yeah, it's tough though, right? Because like in 1997, it's probably a little bit more novel than it is now. Because I feel like they've kind of mined that quite a bit with
better movies and stuff.
Her and Blade Runner 2 and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, yeah. They're on the cutting edge or the initial step in this. So this is Groppler John Zorn. It's a pity.
It's a pity Voyager didn't stick to its premise because I feel like there are some themes to be mined here. If you're that far from the boners of your ancestors, why not recreate Libby or Mark or a Coochie Mama on the holodeck for your recreational I got to say, some of these things I'm reading, I don't even know what the words, I'm just reading them. So like I'm processing as I say them, and some of them are very strange. The social norms for a Barclay in the Alpha Quadrant might have to be questioned when potential companionship is finite in the Delta Quadrant. Given the premise, is it unreasonable that utilizing a holographic surrogate might not be healthier than shit? I just remembered this is a show about people not having sex. Oh well, let's just watch Tuvok play with some bulk nails from Home Depot. And there's space fatal attraction and some shit about a nebula. 1 Vulcan over-explanation of cold shower out of 5.
Yep.
They even drop in like a paraphrasing of the I'm not just going to be ignored, Tuvok. Like that the line from Fatal Attraction.
Yeah.
But even there, it's like, I don't know, maybe that's an interesting idea, but they don't do anything with it.
Yeah. One of my favorite runners is this: the Vulcans have a phrase for everything. Some of them are weirdly specific. Like, Tuvok's like, the Vulcan. This is the Vulcan word for the day after you realize that you mailed something late and you have to get your car from the shop. It's like, what the fuck? The Vulcans have a saying for that. Jonas says, alter ego. I enjoyed
this is the Vulcan word for when you're looking for your sunglasses and you realize they're on your head.
That's happened enough where there is a German word. Jonas says, alter ego. I enjoyed that the main officers actually referenced the episodes of TNG from which this episode is clearly derived. There was not even a pretense of original thinking here. I feel that Tuvok's character, as we have come to know it, would not have fallen for so banal a love interest simply because she noticed that his refusal to wear a garland implied his desire to let others know that he didn't want to be at the luau. Cal's phrase, pop psychology, is too generous. 2 sets of gray Vulcan Tinker Toys out of 5. Maybe my one of my favorite moments of the episode was, I forget the quote exactly, but when Tuvok shows up at the luau and Janeway's there, and Janeway's like, Tuvok, I'm surprised to see you. And he's like, you gave me an order, and I always obey an order, even when it's a fucking stupid order. He says something along those lines, and I appreciated that. Matt Ross, I'll do this one. You can read the last one, I guess. Matt Ross says, Kim is very horny from the Minuet character from Hedonism Beach and thinks Tuvok can chill him out. Tuvok did violate a bro code. The meat of the story with Tuvok was more interesting, meeting an alien who's bored as the crew is on their circuitous way back home. The start of the Paris-B'Elanna fling and the jealousy of Vorik the Vulcan is placed. Neelix's concern of the placement of tiki torches is odd. Why do you need a person to place anything anywhere on the holodeck? Very slowly paced to get the point. 3 Hawaiian shirts out of 5. And our final comment comes from Nick the Rat with alter ego.
When Harry told Tuvok his secret, I was half expecting Tuvok's Kaltoa board to fall limp. This episode, as Vulcans call it, is completely Sue-Lock. When they exposed Kim's... Jesus Christ. When they exposed Kim's Konar, though, I was impressed by its size. I was also impressed by Tom's expert control on the stick and his ability to pull out when absolutely necessary. A much more enjoyable method than Tuvok's way of utilizing abstinence. In the end, Harry was finally able to break through Tuvok's tough exterior and made him realize that playing with himself is not as rewarding as doing it with a friend. I give this one 2 sexually harassed women for Picardo to kiss out of 5.
Kiss him again. No, it's true. Maybe there's a lot of sexual tension in this episode, I think. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, patrons, for leaving your thoughts and supporting the show at patreon.com/the Pensky File. So, Clay, on this one, on our scale 1 to 5, what are you going to give alter ego?
I'm going to give it 2.
Okay. I'll give it a 3, I guess. It was the most interesting episode I've seen in a little while from the show, I suppose, and that's the best I can say about it, although it's Groppler John Zorn's comment is kind of apropos, too. It's like maybe a lot of this just comes from the fact that you're like, oh, there's a thread here. Let's pull it. Oh, it came out and the whole thing fell apart. So I'll give it a 3. Clay will give it a 2. That's it. Patreon.com/the Pensky File if you want to support the show. Clay, do you have anything you want to say?
Check out Riding Hard Picture Show. On Patreon, we're doing Video Nasties. In July, we are doing Bay of Blood, which is one of the progenitors to Friday the 13th. There's a lot of crossover there that I don't know if it gets called out as much as it should. And Sean and I are going to be doing a Patreon episode of Badass where we talk about The Flash.
Yeah.
So come check that out. I think we're going to do like we did with the Batman, where we'll probably release the first 10 or 15 minutes or so on the main feed, and then the whole thing will be on Patreon. So that should be out relatively soon.
There's a Vulcan word for that. But we will be back next episode with Coda. which is a 4-letter word, which I'm just thinking all the podcast thing. The titles have to be at least 5 letters for it not to complain. So Coda is a bad title for a podcast, unfortunately. Thanks, everybody, for listening to our coverage of Alter Ego. We'll be back next week with Coda. See ya.